It's like early Christmas here in the shred spot. I've got all the bikes here for the Steel Bike Showdown, and today we're gonna build up the Extension Potts. I kind of like that they send the bike in 2 boxes. It just makes it feel even more special that you're getting more than 1 box for your bike. So we've got the wheels in this box, we've got the frame and fork in this box, and we're gonna put this whole thing together and get it rolling. The cool thing about building this Extension Potts is that it's a steel street trials bike that they make, and I just finished a test of their carbon street trials bike, the Avenger. Apparently this is supposed to be the steel version of the Avenger, more or less. So I'm anxious to see how close the ride is. Obviously the frame material is going to make a pretty substantial difference in the feel of the bike, but the geometry I believe is pretty close. So I kind of know what to expect with this bike more than the other 2 bikes that we're going to be testing. And that's a good thing. Okay, now the real question is which box to open first. Well, I know this one's going to have wheels in it and I have a rough idea what those are like. I know that the frame is also supposed to be some lemon colored yellow, so I'm super curious to see what that looks like in real life. We've got some pretty bright and interesting colored bikes for the Steel Bike Showdown, so I'm curious to see what this yellow looks like. Moment of truth. Oh, look at that yellow. All right. Well, they certainly pack it well enough. Let's see if we can get down to the frame here. There we go. Interesting. I've got to say, at first glance, it's got more of a gold vibe than a lemon, but it's got this kind of sparkle, kind of bass boat paint color in it, which I think I actually like more than the bright lemon that I was expecting. This is kind of cool looking. I'm also not mad that they sent this 100 mil rise bar with the bike. This bar is actually made of carbon. This is the same one that's on the Avenger. Pretty nice. Didn't expect to have a carbon bar on a steel bike. All right, let's have a look at this fork. Well, it's certainly not as light as the carbon one I got on the Avenger, but this'll do. I'm guessing this will probably be about the same wheel set from the Avenger, but let's have a look. I was actually really surprised they put that carbon bar on. They must have had some extras. Okay, extension pedals, mystery box, little tiny seat. Doesn't have the little bit that the last one did on the carbon bike, but I'm not gonna sit on it anyway, so whatever. 2 wheels that are stuck together. Here's the wheel set. Biggest thing to call out, Maxxis Holy Rollers. These are kind of like the go-to tire for street trials, so we got all the important bits. Now that we've unboxed everything, let's throw it in the stand and put this bike together. Before I get started building this bike up from basically scratch, I'm gonna make one quick change, and that's to put some Magura MT7 brakes on this bike, and for a couple different reasons. Number one, I wanna have a really even playing field for all 3 bikes in the Steel Bike Showdown, and these brakes will get us there. The next thing, there were some supply chain issues getting this bike built complete, and so if you buy this bike from Trial Superstore or wherever, you're gonna probably have to order some specific brakes to go with it. You could get MT7s, you can get some Hayes brakes, you can get some Hope brakes, but I'm gonna use a pair of Maguras that I had lying around in the warehouse just to keep things even. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get the fork on this bike, let's get the stem going, let's get this bike rolling. Extra shout out for the 100 mil rise bars. They're actually the thinnest in terms of width bars that we have. These are 730s, but still pretty cool that they threw a carbon bar in with this bike. I think I'm gonna toss the wheels on here before we start putting the rest of the drivetrain and everything else on. Much like the other steel street trials bikes that we've built so far, this one also has horizontal dropouts with a chain tensioner on the back here. This one has a much shorter and tighter dropout than the other 2 bikes, so it's gonna take a little bit of extra work to get it just right, but that also means there's not a lot of extra room for it to move around, which is totally fine as well. So wish me luck. So what you might be noticing here is that I haven't put the chain on yet, and really what I want to do is just get this wheel into the dropouts, and then we'll add the chain later, and then we'll do the chain tensioning. I just want to get this bike together, and then we can worry about dialing it in. Here's a close-up of what those chain tensioners actually look like. The hard part is over. This bike is now starting to really come together. We've got the Maguras on here, and all we really have left to do is put the chain and pedals on and add some grips, and then we can actually take it outside and give it a little bit of a test. I'm curious to see how this feels compared to its carbon brother, the Avenger. I rode that bike in a video already, had a great time with it, and I'm expecting this to have a very similar feel. I have a feeling it'll be slightly heavier than that Avenger bike, but other than that, my expectation is that it'll be about the same. Speaking of that carbon bike, the Avenger, this bike comes with a very similar spec. The 3 things that I'm noticing that aren't the same is obviously the frame, the fork, and the seat. Everything else is about the same. You've got the carbon handlebar, you've got these 50-50 pedals, which are really solid. Everything else on this bike is about the same as what came with their carbon version of the bike. Pedals are on, and now all we have to do is finish off the drivetrain with this burly looking chain. The exciting thing about this bike that I'm really anxious to try is it has the lowest bottom bracket of the 3 bikes we're testing, but also the shortest wheelbase. Now when it comes to the chain here, it's actually come through just a little bit long, and we're gonna have to take a few links out. Probably because this chain comes with the other bikes, the aluminum and carbon bikes that they have, which have a built-in chain tensioner, which would usually pick up this extra slack. But on the steel bike, we're gonna have to shorten it up just a little bit. So what I've done for that is I've loosened up the chain tensioners, these chain tugs back here all the way. I've pushed the wheel as far forward in the dropout as I possibly can. I'm gonna put this link together here, get it to the right size, and then we're gonna start working on the chain tensioner to pull it back and tighten up this chain. One big benefit of the chain tensioner that you get on an aluminum or a carbon bike is that you can easily take the chain off of it, and it makes it easy to pull the back wheel out. On all the steel bikes we've been testing, that's not necessarily the case. It takes a little bit more work to get the back wheel off once you've gotten it on. These are the 2 tools that you'll normally need to do something like this. This pushes the pin of the chain out, and this pushes the power link back together. Some people don't use the power link in their chain. A lot of people have a personal preference when it comes to that. Some people think it's stronger or weaker. Whatever your preference is, at least you'll need this tool right here. Maybe you'll need this one. Here's how much we took out of the chain. As you can see, there's still a little bit of slack in this chain here, but as you pull the wheel back with the chain tugs, it tightens up real quick. Remember how loose this chain was just a few minutes ago before we put the chain tensioners on? Now, this is just a demonstration. I don't think I'd run it this tight, but interesting to see with just a few turns of the chain tug back here, how tight you can actually make this chain. I'm gonna loosen up just a little bit just to get it right, because what I'm also using this for is getting the wheel just right within the chain stays. If you have it a little bit too tight on one edge, the wheel could actually go a little bit sideways, and that's never good. So you wanna make sure that not only is this at a reasonable tightness, but also that your wheel is centered in those rear dropouts. That's what these chain tugs are for. Then once you feel like you've got everything right from your chain to the way that your wheel sits in the dropout, then it's time to tighten up this bolt again, and you're good to go. And of course, you might not get it right on the first try. The wheel, once you lock it all down, might go to the side just a little bit. It takes a little bit of tinkering with these two to get it right. Okay, I don't know if I love this. These are normal grips. They're not lock-ons by any means. They kind of look like the old school Ori grips that you used to get, which is cool, but I don't have an air compressor to blow these on. So I'm gonna use one of my lock-on pairs of grips that I've got from Deity. I just wanna use lock-on grips for pretty much everything. I'm sure these are fine, but I don't have an air compressor. So all the bikes we're testing have some sort of top cap on the bike that screws into the fork and steerer tube. And the reason for that is that a lot of people like to run a front brake through that fork so they can do bar spins and tail whips. And the reason why it screws in here is that you don't want to have the traditional way that you would install a fork, which is the star nut system. And so by screwing in like this, it makes it easy to slide stuff through. But the top cap for the extension is really interesting because it has this pattern along the outside. And I just realized now as I was tightening the stem how to tighten the top cap. And that's to take your Allen key, put it across here, and then twist it. That's what tightens it on. We're in the home stretch. Now all we have to do is use this torque wrench to make sure everything's tight enough, and then we're gonna weigh it and see how this bike stacks up against the other 2 bikes that we're testing. If there's one lesson I've learned from this torque wrench, it's that I didn't tighten my bolts nearly as tight as I thought I had them. Here comes the real moment of truth. I've got to say, I thought this bike was going to be a little bit heavier than it came in. 25 pounds is not bad, although by the size and shape of it, this is actually the smallest of the 3 bikes. And it comes with carbon handlebars. There's a few little things that probably are helping make it lighter because the fork on this has got to be the heaviest of the 3. So it's interesting to see how all this stuff comes together. We've lucked out. It stopped raining sideways and there's just a little bit of sunlight left. So we're gonna do a little parking lot test with this bike. Maybe a couple manuals, a couple 180s. Let's see what we can do. Well, I've got a couple kinks to work on this bike, but
It'll be interesting to take this out on the first ride. It feels like the smallest of the 3 bikes, but maybe that's an okay thing, especially for a lot of spins and stuff that we're going to be doing with it. I think it's going to be all right. I think it's going to be pretty fun. It does feel a lot like that Carbon Avenger, so make a couple little adjustments here, get this bike dialed in, and we'll take it out on the first ride, weather permitting. So if you want to see the other bikes that are in the Steel Bike Showdown, here's the playlist right here to go check them out. And if you're just getting into street trials and you want to start working on your techniques, this playlist right here will get you going.